Budget time. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Yes, it is a few minutes after 12 afternoon, and so I think we should probably get called to order the meeting with roll call by Mr. Coley.
Commissioner Feinbaum,
Here.
Commissioner Gibson, Commissioner Hamilton,
Here.
Commissioner Herbert,
Here.
Commissioner Simpson Brown,
Here?
Commissioner Small,
Here.
Commissioner Caballero.
Here. I came 15 minutes early and then I wasn't on time. I know, it's a skill.
So, moving on, we will have approval of the minutes. So has everyone had an opportunity to take a look at the April 20th, 23 minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. So we'll start with official action resolution 1476.
I think
We need to vote on the minutes. Mr. Coley, please call the roll.
Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Commissioner Feinbaum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson, Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert. Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Small.
Aye.
Minutes are approved.
Now we will have resolution 1476. It's going to speak about that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As we talked about in last month's workshop, financial workshop, we have a lot of agenda items for you all to approve. It'd be 4 resolutions for your official action to approval. I'd like to recognize Mark Walker, our Senior Vice President, CFO, to go over each of those with you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Today we do have several official action items that are related to the current year budget and then to the proposed budget for FY24. So we'll go ahead and get started. First off, you may recall from our budget discussion in March that we informed the board that wholesale energy prices had been up quite a bit, particularly during the first 6 months of the fiscal year. So our wholesale energy cost, what we purchased from TVA, what we purchased from our natural gas suppliers, was forecasted to be well above budget, and that forecast has not changed. Our most current forecast shows a combined $75 million over budget. Electric's most of that at $58 million. Natural gas commodities up about $17 million for that. So even though there are some offsets for both electric and gas from timing of capital projects, the need remains for additional appropriations to be able to cover those expenditures. What we're requesting is an additional $35 million for the electric division and an additional $15 million for the gas division. Now, as you know, when wholesale energy prices go up, those flow through automatically to our customers, so our revenues are fine and we have funds available to actually pay for those expenditures. And there was documentation in your packets having several certifications showing that funds are indeed available. But that is our proposed amendment for the current fiscal year budget. Any questions on that? Okay. Moving on to our proposed budget for FY24, and we will cover some of the same information we talked about at our April workshop, but we'll go into a little bit more detail on the various cost components today. But as a reminder, in total, for all 5 utility divisions combined, it is a $1.2 billion budget. That does represent an increase of $73 million, or about 6% over our current year forecast for cash expenditures. We talked a lot last month about inflationary pressures, in particular on our operating expenses. So our O&M budget is up about $20 million over our current year forecast. And then capital is up substantially as well, but we discussed that. That's timing of a host of various projects, some very large projects, that's moving from FY23 to FY24. The total capital budget for next year is $284 million. Majority of that is related to utility system infrastructure, $135 million for our various Century 2 programs for electric, gas, water, and wastewater, and $81 million for the continued extension of our fiber backbone and actually hooking up fiber customers as well, $81 million in total for that. A portion of that capital budget we are proposing to fund with new debt, up to $85 million in new long-term revenue bonds in total, and that's $55 million for electric, $20 million for water, and $10 million for wastewater. So there's sort of a high-level summary of what we're looking at for FY24. So beyond wholesale energy, really looking at our operating and capital programs, where are a majority of the dollars going? So this chart sort of reflects some of those major projects, and we've already touched upon the $81 million for fiber. You do recall we are in the midst of a 3-year, $65 million new water filter project at our water treatment plant. $33 million of that $65 million is budgeted to be spent in FY24. I do want to point out that at least in our plan, we have $10 million of that to be funded by grants that have already been approved by the city and the county, and it may be more than that. It's just timing of where we've put things in our budget and our plan for grant funding. Vegetation management, little over $16 million in the proposed budget for that. If we break down that $16 million, the majority of it is going for circuit tree trimming of about 950 miles. Next fiscal year, we also have about $2 million in there for what we call removal of hazardous trees. We think that will cover about 1,800 trees. It just varies and depends, but we do have a decent amount budgeted for that. And those are trees that are outside the trim zone that pose hazards that if they fell, they could have a significant impact on our distribution system. So obviously we work with property owners and all of that, but that is part of our vegetation management program. And then $2 million of the 16 is for storm response because, as we know, storms do happen from time to time. Related to still working on some utility relocations related to the construction of the downtown baseball stadium. We have $12 million in our budget for that. You may recall last year we put all of the dollars in the FY23 budget, and again, timing issues and delays have shifted a portion of that to FY24 for that. And then just a couple of large wastewater projects. We talked back in April about the wastewater trunk line rehab project on Nayland Drive. There's $8 million in the budget for that for next fiscal year. And then we will complete the wastewater pump station at Jones Street by February of 24. So that $4 million should bring that project to a completion. So looking in total at the $1.2 billion budget, and really here just going to touch upon it by the utility divisions real quickly. I know you saw this chart last month, but by division, $773 million goes for electric, and that's always the largest because of wholesale energy and also a relatively large capital program as well. $153 million for the gas division, $111 million for water, $132 million for wastewater, and $30 million for fiber. So next series of slides will go into the major cost components in a little bit more detail so you can see how those cost components break down. First of all, wholesale energy and a little bit of cost of goods sold for fiber. We've merged those two together for convenience sake. Total $554 million. Breaking down those components, $470 million is projected to be paid to TVA for the purchase of about 6 billion kilowatt hours of electric power to meet the needs of our 200,000 plus electric system customers. On the gas side, $78 million is budgeted for the purchase and transportation of about 12 million decatherms of natural gas to meet the demands of our natural gas system customers in the upcoming fiscal year. And then $6 million is for fiber cost of goods sold. Most of that is video related. And much like the wholesale energy and gas, it's just a flow through, in this case, to our fiber customers. So that's the biggest component. Our O&M budget in total is $213 million for the upcoming fiscal year. A big portion of that is labor-related expenses. We have a full-time staffing funding for a full-time staff of about just under 1,200 employees in the budget. $72 million of the payroll is in O&M. About 36 or 34 million. 34 million is in capital labor, which would not appear on this chart. That would be embedded into the capital budget in various places. But other labor-related expenses, healthcare benefits, of course, is about $15 million in their various forms for next fiscal year, and then about $1 million for training. And then for our post-employment benefits, includes contributions to our pension trust fund to keep it funded, and our OPEB trust fund as well, and combined with our 401k matching contributions, total $7 million in the proposed budget for next year. We'd already touched upon vegetation management, some of the other bigger ticket items which typically show up, utility expense. Our water and wastewater pumping stations, treatment plants use a fair amount of electric power. That makes up the majority of our utility service budget of $10 million. We also have $10 million for what we call stock materials, and those are items that we use to help maintain our 5 utility systems. So $10 million in the budget for that, $4 million for chemicals to treat water and wastewater, and then $5 million in access and utilization fees that the fiber division will pay to the electric division for use of their facilities in providing fiber-related services. And that's our O&M summary. Capital, $284 million. 90% of that will be directly related to utility system infrastructure. And you can see a lot of items on the chart under distribution improvements. Those are really our Century 2 programs. And you can see all the systems are represented there with various levels of miles of replacement, substation upgrades, et cetera on that. We also have the $81 million in fiber listed there. We've talked about that. And about $40 million in plant improvements. And the big ticket item, $33 million, is for the MBW filter project on that. The other 10% is really related to purchase of vehicles, equipment, some facilities projects at our various campuses spread throughout our service territory. And $10 million is for information technology. We talked last month about the need to put in a new customer information system, and we will start on that in FY24. And as our existing system is now over 20 years old, so we are in need of a new system. Our debt service budget totals $95 million for next fiscal year. That represents principal and interest payments on our outstanding debt. $49 million of the 95 is to retire debt, just when it matures. So those bonds are paid off. And then $46 million in interest payments for the about $1 billion in outstanding bonds that we had will be made next fiscal year. You break it down by system. Electric has the largest at $34 million. Wastewater close second at $33 million. And then water 15, gas 10 million. You'll note also fiber has about $3 million, and that is paying back part of the loan that electric division's already made, and then interest to electric on that outstanding loan. But in total, $95 million in debt service payments. And then last but not least, in lieu of tax payments and our federal payroll taxes combined, $44 million in the proposed budget. $37 million of that is for in lieu of tax payments, $25 million going to the city of Knoxville, $11 million to Knox County, and $1 million to all the other smaller taxing jurisdictions combined. And then $7 million is included for just how we are required to remit federal payroll taxes to the government. And that makes up a component of the budget as well. So that's a summary of each of the major cost components. How will the proposed budget be funded for FY24? Over 85% will be funded by projected system-generated revenues for all 5 systems combined. In fact, $1.035 billion will go for that. Other funding sources include the $85 million in new bonds will help fund capital for electric, water, and wastewater. We have $55 million in general fund cash on hand that will help to fund the proposed budget. And a lot of that comes from the timing we talked about in March with unspent capital. Cash sort of builds up a little bit more than expected, and that is used to help fund the FY24 budget. $15 million in grants, $10 million for the water filter project, $5 million for build out of broadband in rural areas. And then we have the $9 million from the electric division to the fiber division, which helps fund the fiber budget. And those are the sources of funding for the proposed budget. Talk briefly about the debt that we're proposing to issue. This slide here is really intended to, we've already talked about the breakdown of the $85 million, but some of the common characteristics of each series of bonds. Each series will mature over a period of 30 years. Means that if we didn't refinance somewhere along the way, the bonds would fully mature in 2053. But each series will have a 10-year call provision, which is quite common. And that would allow us the opportunity, if interest rates were favorable, to call the debt and refinance it. But we can't do that before 2033 on these bonds. Importantly, we have budgeted an average interest rate of 5% for each series of bonds. In consultation with our financial advisor, we believe that's still a reasonable rate. Obviously, there's a lot going on with the economy right now and the debt ceiling and what's going to happen. And we are hopeful that everything will work out on that, hopefully by June 1st. But as of now, we believe that that is a reasonable interest rate to expect to receive. Bonds will be secured solely by the issuing system's revenues. Simple, I know you all know this. Electric revenues can pay electric bonds and can't pay anything else. So each system is on the hook for their own debt. And as far as when we'll sell the bonds, we are thinking probably sometime in the fall. I know there are times we think about, well, maybe we should go as quick as possible. Part of that's just a balanced philosophy in there because, we'd like to, one, if you don't need the cash at the time, and two is to wait a little bit into the fiscal year to see how the capital's going. For instance, this time last year, and Chris, I don't remember the exact amount, but we requested authority to issue 11 or 12 million in water bonds, and we ended up not needing to issue any of that because some of the timing on that filter project moved out. So it does, I think, behoove us to wait a little bit if the cash isn't needed, just to see if you want to maybe resize the debt issue from what the amounts we're talking about today. So we are required by our debt management policy to go through each of the proposed bonds by series and to show you some of the projections and how the debt service schedule would look like, beginning with electric, and again, $55 million in bonds spread over 30 years. The graph on the right-hand side of the page just breaks down the projected principal and interest amounts for each of the 30 years. The total interest cost at 5%, average 5%, is $53 million for the electric division. And then on each of these slides, you'll see where we project to end, where we will end, project to end the fiscal year as far as outstanding debt service. And for electric, it's $665 million. So at June 30, 24, when fiscal year closes out, you'd have outstanding bonds of $425 million, and then $240 million in interest cost on those bonds. So you'll see that on the other two slides as well. For water, the $20 million in bonds would generate interest of $19 million over the life of the debt. And then total outstanding debt service just under $300 million at the end of next fiscal year, $204 million in bonds and $92 million in interest cost. And then on wastewater, the $10 million, the projected interest cost at a 5% average rate is $9 million over the life of the bonds. We have more outstanding debt in the wastewater system than we do the other systems, though electric is making a push to surpass it. But we'll end the year with $477 million in outstanding bonds for wastewater and roughly $250 million in interest cost. I will point out that that last bullet, $168 million of the 477 will be retired over the next 10 years. And we've talked about that several times, that our trend for outstanding wastewater debt is going to go down, continue to go down over time. And then looking at what our issuance costs are, the professional fees associated with the sale of the $85 million in bonds, and we are the bond counsel and the financial advisor. If we sell at those amounts, those are fixed by contract. The rating agencies sometimes sort of do their own thing, and these are our best guesses of what they would charge based on past transactions. In total, $415,000. That represents about 0.5% of the par value of the bonds, and that's 50 basis points. So it is considered quite competitive when we've done comparisons with fellow municipals and peer utilities on what their costs are. So, and heading towards the end, the last item to talk about is commitment appropriations, and I think we talked about this last month, but in accordance with the charter, we need an appropriation to cover not only, say, for next fiscal year, we have budget appropriations that covers cash expenditures expected to go out the door during FY24 to be dispersed. But we also need an appropriation to cover if we've committed to an expenditure that would be paid after June 30th of 24. In accordance with the charter, you need an appropriation to cover that as well. And our estimated amount for that is just under $124 million for FY24. And you can see the breakdown by the various 5 divisions. And I know in the documentation we sent you in your board packets, it has a list of projects that make up for each of the systems that $124 million in total. And then just listed here on this slide are some of what those major projects are. And these are typically multi-year projects. They are multi-year projects. You see vehicles and equipment up there as well, and that just indicates the longer lead times we now have for buying trucks, buying heavy equipment. We could make an order on July the 1st, but you may not get it and pay for it until December of 2025. So we are just estimates here on what those would be for commitment appropriations. And that concludes my comments on the proposed official action items. Be happy to answer any questions you might have before you vote on the resolutions.
Mark, you said we're gonna slated to retire $45 million in debt or $49 million in debt.
$49 million is
okay.
what will be retired during the upcoming fiscal year.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's spread over mostly electric, gas, water, and wastewater. Is a little bit of fiber principal on the loan from electric that'll be paid off, but it's mostly the other 4 divisions.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions before we get started? Okay.
So I know we had some, when we talk about debt, there were some ratios, and even with the new debt, we are still within those ratios?
Oh, yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
'Cause I
That-
know
that-
some.
that is a good question.
One utility was getting pretty close to it.
Yes, and that may have been electric. When I think we had a 45%, and it was probably going to be around 43% on that. So, but yes, all of these, even with the new debt issues, are in line with our target ratios, our ranges. Yes.
Music? Okay, so for Resolution 1476, we need a motion and a second on the first and final reading.
Second.
Do we have any visitors who want to speak about this resolution today? Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Small,
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson-Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson, Commissioner Feinbaum,
Aye.
Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Resolution 1476 is passed on first and final reading.
For Resolution 1477, we need a motion and a second on first and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Do we have any visitors today for this particular resolution to speak? Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Commissioner Feinbaum. Aye. Commissioner Gibson. Aye. Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert.
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Small.
Aye.
Resolution 1477 has passed on first and final reading.
Next, we'll have Resolution 1478. We need a motion and a second for first and final reading.
Move for approval.
Second.
Do we have any visitors who want to speak to this resolution? Seeing none, Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Commissioner Feinbaum. Aye. Commissioner Gibson. Aye. Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert.
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Small.
Aye.
Resolution 1478 has passed on first and final reading.
And finally, Resolution 1479. We need a motion and a second on first and final reading for this resolution.
Motion to approve.
Do we have any visitors who want to speak on this resolution? Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Small.
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson. Commissioner Feinbaum. Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Resolution 1479 has passed on first and final reading.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Gabe with his president's report.
Yeah, thank you, commissioners, for that. I want to say that we just met with our Audit and Finance Committee folks last month about next year's audit. Next year's metrics, not audit, next year's metrics. But I want to recognize Kathy Hamilton, Chair of the Audit and Finance Group, to give you some points to talk about.
All right, thank you, Gabe. Just want to notify the board, we did in fact have our Audit and Finance Committee meeting. We met on May the 3rd. We had a full presentation of the 2024 financial and organizational meeting metrics, and we adopted those at that meeting. So now I'd like to recognize Chris Hood, and he's going to share an overview of what we discussed with the full board.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. As Commissioner Hamilton stated, the Audit and Finance Committee recently met to establish the organizational financial metrics for fiscal year 2024. These metrics are to be used as both quantitative and qualitative measures of performance for this upcoming year. I'm going to start out and I'm going to go through the financial metrics first individually, and then we'll switch over to the organizational metric. All right, so for the upcoming fiscal year, we have 3 financial metrics, and this is very timely as we just approved the budget because these are based upon the budget. So the first metric looks very simple. It is that we would come in for each of our operating divisions at our O&M targets or less. As simple as that seems, with the inflation that we've dealt with this year, that might be a little bit more challenging than what we would expect. However, we have adjusted our O&M targets to hopefully give ourselves room to where we can meet these goals for the upcoming year. The next metric, once again based upon budget, is our cash generated from operations. And cash generated from operations can be calculated simply by taking our total operating receipts from each of our divisions. We take out any purchase power cost, take out any O&M, take out our debt service and taxes, and then you also adjust for any grants that you might have received or any reimbursements, and that gives you your that gives you your cash generated from your operations. Obviously on this, we want to be budget or greater. We want to take in more money than what we anticipated. Next up, and this goes into the debt and the bonds that Mark just mentioned, our debt service coverage. This is very important because it shows the financial stability of the organization. This is what our rating agencies use. I see Tavi smiling as he heard this during the May 3rd meeting. But what this ratio really does is it looks at how many times we can pay our max debt with basically that cash generated from operations. We have a debt service policy that requires us to be at least 1.2 times for each of our divisions. However, in collaboration with the rating agencies, we know in order to maintain our ratings, that needs to be higher. So for our electric and gas divisions, that's a 3 times multiplier of how many times we can pay that debt. For water, it's 2 times, and then wastewater, it's 1.5 times. And like I said, that is in collaboration with our rating agencies to maintain ratings. So really, that's the 3 financial metrics as we go into this next year. I'm going to switch over to the organizational metrics. There are 7 of those. You see those listed here. I'm going to touch on each of these individually. So no surprise, first and foremost, safety. I think that's what we start every day with here at KUB. Run a very large construction operation. We want each of our employees to come to work and go home in the same fashion. So safety is of utmost importance. You'll see here previous year's goals along with results. While every year I think we set a goal of really not having any safety incidents that are serious injuries, this is the first time we've actually set the metric at that level. So for the upcoming year, we want 0 serious preventable injuries. And what that serious preventable injury metric is actually all about is the fact that it would not be a lost time incident in which we've got either an employee or employees that did not follow safety policies, procedures, caused an accident, or were involved in an accident in which they had a serious injury. We're talking fracture, serious laceration, electrocution, amputation. These are things where those employees are not going home in the same shape they came to work that day. So always very, very important in our industry to maintain high safety culture. Next up, electric reliability. This is something that as an electric utility is super important to us to be able to keep the lights on. We've got 2 targets here. First of which is based on hours or duration that an individual customer might be out of power over the course of a year. This year we're targeting no more than 2 hours per customer on average that they would be out of power. The other target there is frequency, and this is instances in which you might be out of power. So with our new metering system, we can tell if a customer's out of power 5 minutes or longer, and that's really what this is established on, that average customer would not be out of power more than an hour and 40, or excuse me, more than 1.45 instances over the course of the year. If you think back to the budget workshop last month in which John Gresham was here talking about the electric plan, John mentioned a lot of things that we do every day, all year long to help with this metric. He talked about tree trim. He talked about pole replacement, even some of the new smart technologies. You know, those are the things that we do every day to help with this metric so that when that storm does hit, you know, we're still going to respond to that as quickly as possible. But without those other things that you approve in these budgets, these numbers right here aren't possible. So obviously the day-to-day is just as important as the individual response to the storm. All right, next up, this is right in line with the budget you just approved as well. Each of these are representative of the budgeted amounts for these projects. This is our Century 2 replacement programs. There are 6 goals within this, 3 for electric and then 1 for each of the individual divisions. John talked about these as well as Kurt Stafford, and I'm going to go through these a little bit individually. Substation projects. First of all, if you can remember, John talked about Ellistown substation as well as Fair Drive and Fountain City, that we refurbish those stations over the course of the year. He also mentioned some of that direct buried cable. If you remember the cable he talked about where it was placed directly in the ditch. Now we put all that in conduit. That'll be replaced as well. 5 miles of that this upcoming year. And then 9 miles of transmission mains on our electric system. Next up, natural gas. If you remember John talking about extensive work to be done in Broadacre subdivision in Powell, where we had those steel mains, I think 3.5 miles of steel mains in that one subdivision will be replaced this upcoming year. That's about half of the natural gas steel main replacement that we're targeting to do this year. And then Kurt talked a little bit about some of the older types of pipe in our water system that needed to be replaced. We've got 9.25 miles of that budgeted for this year as a goal, as well as 11.5 miles of wastewater main replacement for Century 2. Now, Century 2 does a lot more things than this. These are the goals that we're highlighting. Next up, a little bit more on the quantitative side of things. is the work that we're doing in the DEI space. Really had a great jump on this metric this current year with a lot of the foundation that we established through training with our employees. All of our employees, specifically our management groups, went through a number of DEI sessions to really establish a foundation this year to build off of, to do this phase 2 training in 2024. One of the main things we really want to do this year is move from foundational really to culture at KUB. Ultimate goal that everybody that's here at KUB feels like they belong, and that's of utmost importance. The other thing that we've recognized is in our recruiting efforts that we have certain groups that might not be as represented in our applicant pools. So we can't hire people if they're not there. And that's one of the things we want to do with this is really branch out more, like the event we had with the Community Expo, to meet people where they are and let people see that KB is an employer that they would want to be a part of and get those applications in so that we can expand those hiring pools. Call center performance. This one is all about meeting customer expectations. While this is, only a measure on the quantitative side of things, we realize that if we cannot get a customer call in a timely fashion, the quality of that customer expectation and experience goes down as well. So as we were going into 2023, we were looking at numbers on our call center with the number of calls that were answered in 90 seconds to be ranging in the 20% range. And we just didn't feel like that was meeting the expectation of our customers. So last year we established through Audit and Finance a 3-year goal, a stair-step goal that would take us to 60% of those calls, 70% of those calls this year, and then 80% next year. When we set the 60%, we knew that was not really going to be feasible. It was an aspirational goal for this year, but as you see what's happened throughout this year, as we've added resources, as we've brought in consultants to look at this, as we've changed some technologies we're using, the last 3 months, it's starting to happen. This is what we were hoping for. Last month, we reached 74% of those calls being answered in that 90-second time horizon. So as we look at 70% this year, that's starting to look a lot more doable. We're heading the right direction. And without putting that stretch goal out there last year, I don't think we would have gotten here next year.
I don't know if we do questions or comment now or later, but one of the
You
things
can,
that
whenever you
one of the things
like.
that I thought, so I have a list of notes, so I'll start here and work.
Now,
and
don't
we'll
get
go
too
back
far
at
on
the
that
end.
notes.
But one of the things that I thought was important when we talked about call center performance is not necessarily just the time that a call was answered, but also did we meet, did we resolve their issue, right? And so-
Did we help the customer?
And we
Yes.
had a conversation about that I thought was really beneficial for this board to know.
Yeah.
Because it's not just to say, did we answer their call in 90 seconds, but did we resolve their call? And then as we look at all the types of calls that come in, are there systemic or structural things then that we need to go in and address so that we don't get those calls in again? So I think that was really important
This is something
to talk about.
Yeah, this is something we talked about at the committee level, just about, like I said, this is very quantitative. It is, are we meeting a number? That does not say, is that customer satisfied after that call? Like I said, we know if they wait for 20 minutes to get a call answered, they are not going to be satisfied no matter what happens on that call. Right. So it's the first step in getting there. But we are close, and this is what we had talked about as a committee, we are very close to having it set up through our system to where we can get that customer survey after the call to measure that quality of that call. Right. So that's next steps. We're about to get there. So,
it would also
perfect.
be interesting to know in the future interesting to know in the future the amount of calls coming in each month, right? To kind of compare that to the percentage of completed calls within 90 seconds.
Yeah, and I guess that's another avenue. There are other pieces of technology in which we have stair-step that number of calls down. Customers can interact in other ways. However, this is still important because this body of customers, this is how they are choosing to interact. So,
is the call center service performance gauged differently between the fiber division and our other utilities?
yes, this is our main call center right here. So this is the what I would call the other four: water, wastewater, gas, electric. That's what we're looking at with this metric.
But as far as service level, they're exactly the same.
We hold them to the same standard in that particular regard, so.
I guess my question is, are they, each department has its own service group, or is it the same group responding to questions, customer service questions
Yeah.
across the organization?
So this is if you call into KUB to place an order for service, it is either the call center that we're looking at here, or you're requesting service for fiber. So you're going into one of those two avenues. But the main call center would answer any of your questions for electric, gas, water, wastewater.
Thank you.
All right, Tavy, you said you had a list. Does that get your list?
We're good.
I'll just add also with regard to quality, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Commissioner Small. We do quality measures today. Those are measures that we're internally evaluating costs to ensure that that problem was resolved. So we don't just stop at looking at service. But Chris is absolutely right. We do think it's important to actually hear directly from the customer what their experience has been. And so that's why we're moving towards having some type of customer survey instrument that measures customer satisfaction. And then in terms of call volume, we do measure that, and that is something that we look at very frequently. And as Chris mentioned, there are methods that we use to try to divert that call to a self-service option. But then there are customers that just honestly want to speak with us. And so we try to make sure that representatives are available and we're answering that call quickly and that quality still is there.
Yeah.
within
I guess
that
my
call.
question was, thank you for that clarification. I guess my question was more around, you have a 74% success rate in April versus a 29% success rate in January. How many calls came in January versus how many calls came in that month to kind of judge that percentage?
Absolutely, and volume does fluctuate. I will say that across this period of time, it is within kind of a standard average, so they haven't been significantly different. Generally, it's around the 30,000 or so calls within the month, but that does fluctuate from month to month based on the season and things that are happening within the community. But we do look at that, and we do use that as a measure to say, okay, well, it was a busy month. It would expect that our service level might drop a bit, or we should be planning a bit differently with how we have our staff in place to accommodate for seasonality kind of swings in volume.
Well, move on to our next organizational metric, which is one that KB holds very dear, and that's our commitment to the environment and sustainability of resources. We've got four metrics within the environmental category. The first one is our weatherization programs. This is something that we've talked to the board many times about. We utilize the rounded up funds from our customers, KB contributions, as well as TVA contributions to work toward that weatherization program. This year, we're scheduling hopefully 250 homes to be weatherized within KB's service territory. This is on top of the work that we continue to do there year after year. So this is something that KB has been committed to for a while now. The next one is something that is very appropriate and very timely as we launched our community solar subscriptions last month. Really got out of the gate strong on that. A lot of commitments there. We're already up to 55% subscription. And we knew that there was a chance that there would be a surge at the first. But the goal for next year to get to 70% is, may take a little bit of marketing, may take the next steps to ensure that we're subscribing out that community solar project. Next up, it's customer education. And this is something that we do in a variety of formats. It's both live in-person events, it's some virtual events that we do, as well as mail outs to reach customers. Goal next year would be to educate at least 1,000 customers on efficiency type programs. And then lastly, programs similar to the weatherization program, but much smaller in scale. It's called our Water Savers program, and this is really to help lower income folks with water issues at their home. So it may be a service line issue, it may be a leaky toilet, that type of thing, where ultimately water's going through the meter, it's on their side, they're having to pay the bill, so we're trying to help them to get these type of issues remedied. All right, brings us to our last one, fiber service availability. Jamie stole the punch on this last month. This should be all the stuff that you heard him talk about during his fiber presentation. And this metric right here is really all about construction. It's about building that backbone. It's about building the fiber network out so that we can have new customers connect. If you remember from Jamie's presentation, we started out in the green areas when we launched fiber. The gold areas are where we hope to have completed by the end of the current fiscal year, FY23. All right, so with those two areas completed, we would have availability to up to 25,000 customers. So next year, when we look at FY24 and you look at the blue areas, this is a lot of work to be done. We're going from 25,000 customers available to 90,000 customers available. So there's a lot of work for our internal KUB resources, our contractors that work with us to get basically cable up and fiber ready to go to our customers. But that concludes our financial and organizational metrics for the year.
Sorry, Tavy. I was going to say, I do have one other comment back to the electric reliability for folks who have not been on the audit committee before and may not have heard the full presentation. These are exclusive of major storm events.
Yes.
And so if you have an outage caused by a major storm event, that is not included in this calculation. So.
Yeah, we use a IEEE standard, which is an industry standard that each utility would calculate their major storms the same. Now, it may result in different results for each system, but for KB right now, that's about 1.6, 1.7 million minutes of customer outages would constitute a major storm. So it's got to be something pretty big to be excluded from here.
You know,
Thank you.
As I was going back to thinking about the budget and someone who serves on the audit committee, it's a big budget. It's massive. But as I think about, I am someone who has some loved ones who was affected by the Flint water crisis, right? And when you think about the lack of infrastructure that happened there, and not only the lack of water, but also the health outcomes that have affected many of those folks, many Black and brown people, I think it's important that I at least recognize that it's important that we do the work that we need to do to maintain our system, particularly as you think about the water system, because when you talk about safety, I wrote down the word safety, but I also thought about it from kind of a health and safety perspective, where we can provide safe drinking water and other water for our customers. So I think it's important that we know that that's important to us, and that's why we do the work, and that's why we put so many resources into it, because when you have it, you don't think about it. But when you don't have it, you know how it can affect your community and affect your people. So
Yeah, exactly. That's why we are currently financing $65 million project, our largest project ever on the water system, for the whole, I guess, largest project for the whole utility on our water system right now.
right. So thank you for that.
Thank you, commissioners, for those questions and comments, and I appreciate the presentations. At this time, I'd like to invite Amy Edge. She's our TVA East Regional Customer Relations Director. She's our key account rep, as I call it, for our area. And while she's making her way up, I want to also introduce Adam Borden, who's our TVA Energy Services Consultant, who's joined us today. So, Amy, thank you.
I'll tell you, it's a delightful experience for Adam and I to be here today to join the board and share a little bit about the partnership that TVA and KUB has in a whole lot of areas, but specifically the Energy Right programs today. We want to thank you all for your leadership in this space. It has been impactful for the community for really several decades now at this point. And today we're going to recognize the following top performer designations for KUB. The first place award for the DIY home energy assessment, over 200,000 kilowatt hours of energy savings from 218 participants. Really impressive. Second place award in recognition of the Home Uplift Program with close to 900,000 kilowatt hours of energy savings from 392 participants. We also want to give a shout out to KUB for supporting the Home Uplift through a partnership with the community-based organization Centro Hispano. I'm not sure that I said that accurately, but here in East Tennessee. And one of the reasons that is so important to us is that partnership with that particular organization around Home Uplift really helps us to be more inclusive of the non-English speaking community and allowing them to participate in some of the programs that we offer jointly with KUB. And then finally, a second place award acknowledging improved energy equity with total energy equity of over $5 million. So realizing that we have 153 local power companies in the TVA service territory, and KUB has received these awards, is really a testament to the level of service. And I'll tell you, today, TVA is actually turning 90 years old, 90 years old today, yeah? And so today we have actually a valley-wide day of caring. And so TVA's level of commitment and service is matched equally by KUB's commitment to y'all's community. The care, the concern, the commitment that you display every day in really helping to be folks, let them enjoy their lives and really prosper here in Knoxville is just a huge testament to the commitment of this board and to this leadership team. And TVA is thankful for the partnership. It's been long-lasting and will continue for decades to come. So we're thrilled to be here today. And we'd like to invite Gabe Bolus and also Board Chair Simpson Brown. If you'll come up, we'd like to present you with this award. And Adam, you can read the award itself.
I could read the award.
Yes.
It's just an Energy Right Top Performer, Knoxville Utilities Board 2022.
Congratulations and thank you. Thank you so much. Dave, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to say a few words real quick.
Oh, excuse us.
So let me just say, KUB's been in existence for 84 years already, this month, actually.
Yeah.
And our partnership with TVA goes back that far, and things like this, we do together. And I really appreciate what you've been in as far as the ideas, the funding, the support through these programs, and we continue to look for new ideas and opportunities, and so thank you for giving us this opportunity and presenting this award to us. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah, go ahead. You don't want to drop it.
Thank you. Thank you.
If I could see, I would have said my remarks up at the podium. But I do want to say, on behalf of the board, I want to thank TVA for this recognition. We are very proud of the strong history KUB and TVA have in working together to not only serve our community with safe, reliable, and affordable electric service, but to also improve quality of life with special programs that go above and beyond the basics of providing utility service. Alongside TVA, we have achieved so much to make a difference in the lives of our customers. I am especially proud of seeing KUB honored as a renewable energy leader with this year's awards, and we appreciate TVA's support as KUB launched Knoxville's first community solar program, and as we continue to work on other commitments to solar power through Green Invest. We've also continued to work together to serve lower-income customers with weatherization assistance and are so pleased to have passed the milestone of serving more than 2,500 customers to help them gain better control of their utility bills and have more efficient homes. We are very grateful to TVA for our partnerships. Thank you for the awards presented today and for all you do to support KUB and our customers. We really appreciate you and look forward to our continued partnership. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the board today?
The last speaker provided this handout, so I'm going to pass this out.
Okay. Okay, first up, we have Mr. Kent Minot.
Good day, Commissioners. Nice to
Good
see you all
afternoon.
again. I'm Kent Minot. I live at 311 West Glenwood Avenue here in Knoxville, 37917. Before I begin, I really appreciated the presentation by TVA Home Uplift, especially the metrics on the energy savings. I really appreciate hearing that. I'm working with Seed on getting more customers signed up, so thank you for that. Actually, today, I have an easy job because I'm going to recommend to you an action that you already intend to take. So forgive me for taking advantage of such an easy opportunity to claim a victory. But I'm told by reliable sources that KUB is on the verge of signing the TVA's 5% flex plan and working with local power companies to facilitate self-generation of renewable energy is a major goal for the Sierra Club. We're already enthusiastic supporters of the community solar project out by the Public Works Building. And KUB did us all proud back when you were faced with TVA asking you to sign a 20-year evergreen contract that didn't allow you the flexibility to deploy enough renewable energy to meet Knoxville's greenhouse gas reduction goals. But leadership here mustered the creativity to garner support from two other municipal power companies that retail TVA electricity and use the combined negotiating power to win a substantial solar resource with TVA's Green Invest program, along with other benefits. That was commendable business leadership, and had things gone as planned, KUB would have been able to deliver to customers 20% of its total demand in solar-generated electricity. Now, the pandemic intervened, however, and reduced the volume of solar energy from that arrangement from 500 megawatts to 350 megawatts. Correct me if I've got the figures wrong there, but I think that's about right. But it's nobody's fault, just mostly supply chain difficulties. But we hope that by using the 5%, which CEO Jeffrey Lyash has publicly stated is not a ceiling but a floor, we can begin a process of not only bringing the share of renewables in KUB's portfolio back up to 20%, but actually raising it higher with further developments using that same creativity. Now, it's lucky that we appear to have located a very appropriate site nearby that might host a KUB-owned and operated solar facility. My friend John Nolt is going to tell you more about the actual site, but that Smoky Mountain smelter site, the one in question in South Knox, is nowhere near in the bag. And in fact, we've heard that it was up for auction this morning. We don't know what's happened with that. But the site has three big advantages that we should keep in mind no matter what its current status. It's on a brownfield that's hardly suitable for normal commercial or residential development. It's right here in the service area, and it enjoys enthusiastic support from the surrounding community. So I hope we can all work together to make it a reality. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Eric Johnson here.
I've been texting him, and he's not here yet.
He's not here. Okay. John Nolt. Mr. Nolt, you'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name's John Nolt. I live at 505 Hayworth Drive, 37920 in South Knoxville. Since the 1980s, I've been working with people in the Vestal community who are faced with 5 Superfund sites, all within a stretch of a mile along Maryville Pike, approximately a mile. These are all connected with David Witherspoon Incorporated in one way or another. You've probably heard of them. As Kent mentioned, the community has been very concerned about what the disposition of these sites is going to be. In particular, they're extremely anxious to avoid heavy industrial development there because they want to be a residential community and not an industrial community. So that's the goal. of the Vestal community. The Vestal community organization what was it, last week or the week before, voted unanimously to support the idea of a solar installation in the community, and that's why we're here. We're coming to ask KUB if there is any way that you could put on your agenda the construction of a solar energy array on some of these brownfield sites that otherwise might be open to development, which would be detrimental to the Vestal community. A solar energy installation would be compatible with the residential area. It would be not noisy, it would be clean. It would be precisely what the Vestal community is looking for as the kind of development they want there. The deeds for these properties are restricted because there's still waste on the properties. There are clay caps, and it's different for the different ones of the 5, but there are clay caps on them. You can't dig deep in there, but you can put stuff on the surface. And so the idea that we would like to propose for the KUB board is that you take a look at these. Think about whether it's possible to use these properties. They are brownfields. There's presumably some money or some available for brownfield development. So that would be helpful to the community. It would be helpful, I think, to KUB, and it would certainly be a step forward for Knoxville. I want to emphasize what an important environmental injustice has been inflicted on Vestal. Al Gore came down to Vestal in, 91, 92, gave a big speech at Mary Vestal Park. We had a march to clean up these toxic waste sites. There's been a good bit of effort to do that, but they're still there, and they're still inviting to industries who want to come in, and a number of industries do want to come in and develop those in ways that would not be compatible with the residential community. So our plea to you is to please take a look at those sites, see if there's any way KUB could utilize them, and particularly for solar installation, that would be very beneficial to Vestal. Thanks.
Ms. Odell, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Deb Odell, and actually I live in West Knoxville on Hart Road. So I'm actually out of the KUB service area. I actually live in the Lenoir City Utilities Board area. And I want to let you know, first of all, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I want to let you know that I bought solar panels for my roof and a Tesla 3 years ago. LCUB does not give me a dime for the energy that I give them, and I pay them for any of their energy that I use. Now, I do have friends in the KUB area that do have solar panels, and that they have a much better arrangement with KUB to get support for the energy that they produce. Thank you. But as you can see from the latest reports about El Nino, global warming may dramatically increase in the coming years. Frankly, I think that residential and industry rooftops represent a huge potential real estate area that can move solar renewable energy forward and help with climate change, especially since LCUB complains about not finding any land to build a solar project. Many local residents and companies would be glad to invest in this effort, in buying, storing, and buying solar panels for their rooftops, even at the cost. And more than, if utilities like KUB and other utilities, but especially KUB as a leader, would support this, the greater investment that local residents and local companies would make, and the greater investments that you could make. And as you've probably read, distributed energy resources which is the stored energy in batteries and all other areas of the electric grid, actually, again, with renewables, does vast effort to improve the resilience and reliability, especially during major weather events, of the electric grid. So I get this, that this is the bleeding edge, and we're going to make mistakes as we move forward, which I can tell you from personal experience. But it is critical that all of us try to move forward, and especially with leaders like KUB, which I thank you for what you do. Now, by the way, a few days ago, the National Academy of Sciences published a report on the role of net metering in the evolving electricity system. Let me know if any of you guys would like a copy of that, and I will email that to you. Finally, I just really want to thank KUB for what you are doing as leaders in this area, and I encourage you to do more. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chet Hunt, and I'm a member of the Knox Climate Watch. And I just want to say right off, I appreciate the time you're giving me here to speak. And I came just to offer some reminders that right now, in terms of global warming and the climate crisis, we are at 420 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. Mankind has never lived with that ratio ever. So the warming trajectory is rising. It's a rising slope. And coupled with the projected El Nino that was mentioned earlier, effects, we should be in for a wild ride this season. In fact, it was in the news this morning and yesterday, headlining that we may reach 1.5 with the El Nino effects. We've never done that before. So that's the level that the Paris Agreement wanted us to try to stay at or stay under. But we may reach that this coming year. And the good news is that it may not be permanent because it's an El Nino effect, so it may fluctuate. But the fact that we're hitting that is just scary. Let me see here. The world is now more likely than not to breach that 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming above pre-industrial levels, as I mentioned. This is the first time it's done that. And it's a critical global temperature limit, according to the World Meteorological Organization, thanks to a combination of heat-trapping gases from fossil fuels and the looming events coming from El Nino. The bad news is, as we know, the climate crisis brings with it increased frequency of more storms, more powerful storms, droughts, floods, and fires, all of which affects our pollinators and other important insects, which have been alarmingly declining. And as an organic gardener, that really concerns me. I do everything I can to attract pollinators so I have a productive garden. But as you know, I'm sure, we are having a problem with that. So along with the opportunities that they were talking about using reclamation sites such as brownfield or polluted sites for the purpose of generating clean energy in the way of solar farming, you can also turn them to beautiful pollination parks along with that. My background is I'm a city manager and an urban planner, and I dealt with some brownfields back in the 70s, 125 acres of waterfront along the Detroit River. What we did is we brought in a hydrogeologist, analyzed the groundwater movements, intercepted it, rinsed it with rinsing wells, diverted it before discharging it back into the river as clean water. We did not allow any more industry to go onto that site as they're proposing to you today. What we did was we turned it into a municipal golf course. We brought in truckloads of dirt and buried it. We didn't allow any digging. We buried it, created tree lots, pollinator parks, municipal golf course, overlooks on the river, and it's one of the most, feather in the cap sites for the city of Wyandotte. But anyways, it can be done. That's a great reclamation of that site. Extreme glacial melts and record ocean heat, which causes sea level rise through thermal expansion, even if the contributions of the glacial melts aren't contributing a great deal, the thermal expansion, because of the warming temperatures of the ocean, is causing sea level rises. And that has been 4.62 millimeters a year between the years of 2013 and 2022. In a major UN report detailing the havoc of climate change. That is about double the pace the first decade on record, which was 1993 to 2002, leading to a total increase of over 10 centimeters since the early 90s. I'm almost out. Anyways, I want to encourage you to seriously consider the proposal that was made earlier about looking at those brownfield sites. What a wonderful opportunity to have an adaptive reuse of that land. Another thing that I would encourage you to do is look at partnering with TVA again, because they have all these transmission routes. And in my neighborhood in West Knoxville, they are wide, broad swatches of land where the trees are already cleared and the sun just, falls onto it. What an opportunity to have, and they already control the sites, although I know there's just different dispositions for those routes. But they already control that land. It's already being maintained in much regard, and wonderful opportunity for solar corridors. Thank you very much.
Mr. Hunt. York Hayward Camp.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm York Haver Camp. Hi, thank you. I'm York Haver Camp. It's nice to see you all, and thank you for letting us speak. I'm a beneficiary of KUB services, and so thank you for that. I work with the National League of Cities. That's my job. To broadly speaking, help cities thrive in the state of Arkansas. I also want to mention it's nice to see TVA here. I was on city council for 7 years in Norris, and of course, front and center. And during my graduate studies at American University, I think probably the most common thread among all my courses and the readings would be TVA, because they're such a good example. So it's cool. I just want to say, a lot of what we do in our work, in my National League of Cities work, is to, broadly speaking, help cities thrive. And so looking at your KUB blueprint of vision and values, it mentions community, it mentions thriving, it mentions the quality of life. And that's the center of my work, and I think you can tell from that blueprint it's really important to KUB as well. I've also been fortunate this past year and a half in working with KWEA, Knoxville Water and Energy for All, doing their data analysis. In front of you is just some really simple analysis using Excel. KWA spent over $2,000 last year through open records requests to purchase the KUB data for 2022. We also did it in 2021, and there's a lot here that you can look over. I maybe just mention a couple points. For example, the zip code 37915, which is the only zip code with a majority non-white population in KUB territory. The disconnection rate is 17.1%. That's about 1 in 6 households. It's 3 times the KUB average. However, if you look at the average KUB costs, it actually, of all the zip codes that you get all 4 utilities from KUB, has the lowest average household cost. So it's not that they're spending tons of money on utilities, they're actually spending the least, and yet they still have the highest disconnection rate. 1 in 6 in 2022 households were disconnected, which is quite something. If we have time at the end, maybe we'll go over some other analysis because it's remarkable. I'm going to mention utility burden. We also have just started the preliminary data analysis using SPSS. If you're familiar, it's an IBM program for data analysis, very well respected. For 2021, the results were quite something, and I actually sent them to a few professors of mine in American that do utility work, have done a lot in Washington, D.C. Their email back started with, "This is the largest racial disparity we have ever seen in research." Our analysis, using just the 16 zip codes with all 4 utilities, worked, we worked hard to make a model that was a really good predictor with the data we had. We got up to a 94% model. For utility burden, as expected, what would cause a utility burden? What would be the biggest predictors? The answer is poverty, median income. So you would suspect if you look at disconnection rates, it would be similar. Poverty should matter, right? If you can't pay your bills, it's because you don't have the money to do so. However, the research is remarkable, and we work really hard to ensure there's no multicollinearity. We work really hard to make sure that there's no bias in our research. We do automatic linear regressions, waterfall method linear regressions, to make sure that it is solid as we can. However, race in a zip code is not only the biggest predictor, it's remarkable. It's highly statistically significant. But the standardized beta, which is basically saying this is the biggest predictor for disconnections, for race, in a zip code, is 0.8 for black. And then for white in a zip code, it's actually negative 0.8. The higher the number, negative 0.1, or negative 1 to positive 1, is the biggest, is huge, right? So it's the biggest predictor for disconnections, and yet it's barely there for utility burden. That is really significant, and it would be awesome to sit at a table and say, what can we do? I'll just real quick say a lot of what I do is results-based accountability in my work, and that's saying where do we want to go and how are we going to get there? What kind of partners can sit at our table to say we want lower disconnection rates. We want to do better. How are we going to get there? What partners in the community are going to help us get there? And I think this is a great opportunity for TVA, KUB, and the community to work together. Thank you for your time.
Following the adjournment of this meeting, the board will have a lunch session that is open for the public to observe. This meeting is adjourned.